The argument from fallacy. As you learn more about critical thinking, logic, and logical fallacies, you'll become better at spotting fallacies in arguments. But when you spot a fallacy in someone's argument, you must know how to handle it properly, otherwise you could be committing a fallacy of your own called the argument from fallacy, also known as the fallacy fallacy. The argument from fallacy claims that because an argument contains a fallacy, then the argument as a whole must be wrong. If you recall learning about formal versus informal fallacies, you might remember that an informal fallacy does not necessarily make the conclusion false. It is possible for an argument to contain an informal fallacy, while the conclusion is still correct. This is a bit like saying someone is right for the wrong reasons. The conclusion is correct, but the argument is wrong. Let's look at an example that demonstrates this. Consider this argument. All women are doctors. Susie is a woman. Therefore, Susie is a doctor. This argument contains an obvious fallacy. One of the premises of this argument is that all women are doctors, which is obviously not true. However, despite that fallacy, if Susie is in fact a doctor, the conclusion is still correct. If you were to conclude that Susie is not a doctor just because the argument has a fallacy, then you would be committing the argument from fallacy. Now this is where things get messy very quickly, because if you commit the argument from fallacy, then your debate opponent might conclude that your counter-argument is wrong, which is itself an argument from fallacy. In other words, despite your argument from fallacy, you could be in fact correct to conclude that Susie is not a doctor. The bottom line is that the argument from fallacy is a two-way street. If your debate opponent commits an argument from fallacy, you have to be careful how you call them out on it, otherwise you could be committing the very same mistake. The best way to avoid a downward spiral of fallacies is to turn your attention back to the original point and demand more evidence or an alternative argument based on sound premises. This recording is by learnabit.com. Learn about science in 10 minutes or less with free audio lectures from Learnabit. That's LERNABIT.com.